Sometimes our greatest strength becomes our biggest weakness. This is the story of Samson, a man chosen by God, blessed with extraordinary power, but who misused his strength. Yet in the end, one decision changed everything. This is a story that will leave you thinking long after it's over. For many years, the children of Israel lived under the oppression of the Philistines, who ruled over them with great cruelty. Their enemies had taken control of their land, and the people were filled with fear. During this dark time, in the town of Zorah, there was a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan. He and his wife had no children, and their hearts were heavy with sorrow. But one day, something miraculous happened. As Manoah's wife sat alone, an angel of the Lord appeared to her and spoke these words: "Behold now, thou art barren, and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." The woman was filled with wonder and quickly ran to tell her husband what had happened. She said to Manoah, "A man of God came unto me, and his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God, very terrible. But I asked him not whence he was, neither told he me his name. But he said unto me, Behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and now drink no wine nor strong drink, neither eat any unclean thing. For the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death." Manoah was amazed and prayed to the Lord, saying, "O my Lord, let the man of God which thou didst send come again unto us, and teach us what we shall do unto the child that shall be born." God heard his prayer, and once again the angel appeared to his wife while she was alone in the field. She ran quickly to fetch Manoah, saying, "Behold, the man hath appeared unto me, that came unto me the other day." Manoah followed her, and when he saw the angel, he said, "Art thou the man that spakest unto the woman?" The angel replied, "I am." Then Manoah asked, "How shall we order the child, and how shall we do unto him?" The angel repeated what he had told his wife before. Manoah then prepared an offering, but when he placed it upon a rock, the angel ascended in the flame of the altar. Manoah fell on his face and feared, saying, "We shall surely die, because we have seen God." But his wife comforted him, and soon she bore a son and called his name Samson. As Samson grew, the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him, filling him with strength and courage. One day, he went down to Timnath, where he saw a Philistine woman who pleased him. He returned to his parents and said, "I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife." His parents were troubled and said, "Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson insisted, saying, "Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well." His parents did not know that this was of the Lord, for God was seeking an opportunity to move against the Philistines. As Samson traveled again to Timnath, a young lion suddenly roared against him. But the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and with his bare hands he tore the lion apart as one would tear a kid. He did not tell his parents what he had done. Later, when he passed by the place again, he saw bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. He took some and ate, and he also gave some to his parents without telling them where it came from. At his wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to his Philistine guests. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. If they could solve it within 7 days, he would give them 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if they failed, they would have to give him the same. For 3 days they could not guess the answer. The Philistines threatened Samson's wife, saying, "Entice thy husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire." She wept before Samson, saying, "Thou dost but hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me." After much pleading, Samson finally told her, and she betrayed him to the Philistines. When they answered the riddle, Samson knew he had been deceived. In anger, he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men, took their garments, and paid his debt. Burning with rage, he left his wife and returned to his father's house. After Samson left his wife in anger, her father, thinking Samson no longer wanted her, gave her to one of Samson's companions. Later, when the wheat harvest had come, Samson decided to visit his wife and brought a young goat as a gift. But when he arrived, her father would not let him enter, saying, "I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead." Hearing this, Samson burned with anger. He said, "Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure." He went and caught 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail in pairs, and fastened a torch between each pair of tails. Then he set the torches on fire and released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, burning their wheat fields, vineyards, and olive groves. When the Philistines learned that Samson was the one who had done this, they said, "Who hath done this?" And they were told, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion." In their rage, the Philistines went up and burned Samson's wife and her father's house with fire. Samson was filled with even greater fury. He said, "Though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease." He went and attacked them viciously, smiting them with a great slaughter. Afterward, he went down and dwelt in the rock of Etam. The Philistines, seeking revenge, went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The men of Judah asked, "Why are ye come up against us?" And they answered, "To bind Samson are we come up, to do to him as he hath done to us." Seeing that the Philistines had gathered against them, the men of Judah were afraid. So 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam, where Samson was staying. They said to him, "Knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that thou hast done unto us?" Samson replied, "As they did unto me, so have I done unto them." The men of Judah told him, "We are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hand of the Philistines." Samson agreed, but made them swear, "Swear unto me, that you will not fall upon me yourselves." They answered, "No, but we will bind thee fast, and deliver thee into their hand, but surely we will not kill thee." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. As they approached Lehi, the Philistines saw Samson and shouted against him. But suddenly the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes on his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. Looking around, Samson found a new jawbone of a donkey, reached out, and took it. With it he slew 1,000 men. After the battle, he stood victorious and declared, "With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men." When he had finished speaking, he cast away the jawbone and called the place Ramath Lehi. But after such a great victory, Samson was very thirsty. He cried out to the Lord, saying, "Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant. And now shall I die for thirst, and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised." So God opened a hollow place in Lehi, and water came out. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he revived. After these events, Samson judged Israel for 20 years. But one day, he traveled to Gaza and saw a harlot there. He went in to spend the night with her. When the Gazites heard of it, they surrounded the place and waited all night to kill him, saying, "In the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him." But Samson arose at midnight, and instead of fleeing, he took hold of the doors of the city gate, along with the 2 posts, and tore them away, bars and all. He lifted them upon his shoulders and carried them to the top of a hill before Hebron. Some time later, Samson fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came to her and said, "Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him. And we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver." Delilah went to Samson and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. Samson, knowing she was up to something, answered her falsely. He said, If they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. So the Philistine lords brought 7 green withs, and she bound him with them, while men lay in wait in the room. Then she cried, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. But he broke the withs as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. Delilah, upset, said, Behold, thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. Delilah continued to press Samson, trying to uncover the secret of his great strength. She said to him, Thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. Samson, still unwilling to reveal the truth, said, If they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Delilah took new ropes and bound him, then cried out, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. But once again, he broke the ropes from his arms as if they were a thread. Delilah became even more frustrated and said, Hitherto thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. Samson told her another false answer. If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web, and fasten it with the pin, then shall I be weak. That night, Delilah wove his 7 locks into the loom, and fastened them with a pin. Then she cried, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. He awoke from his sleep, and pulled away the pin, the beam, and the web. Delilah was now angry and determined. She pressed him daily with her words, and urged him until his soul was vexed unto death. Finally, Samson could no longer resist. He told her everything. There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man. Delilah, seeing that he had finally told her the truth, sent word to the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he hath shewed me all his heart. The Philistines came with their silver, and as Samson slept on Delilah's lap, she called for a man to shave off his 7 locks of hair. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. She cried, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. He awoke and said, I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself. But he knew not that the Lord was departed from him. The Philistines seized Samson and gouged out his eyes. They bound him with fetters of brass and took him down to Gaza, where they put him in prison to grind grain. No longer was he the mighty warrior of Israel. He had become a slave, blinded and humiliated. But even as he suffered, something was happening. The hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. The Philistine lords, unaware of its significance, continued to mock him and kept him imprisoned. One day, the lords of the Philistines gathered in a great feast to offer sacrifices to their god Dagon. They rejoiced, saying, Our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand. The people celebrated, singing, Our enemy, the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us, is now in our power. As the feast went on and their hearts were merry, they called for Samson to be brought out, that he might entertain them. Blind and weak, Samson was led by a young lad to the great temple where thousands of Philistines, including their rulers, had gathered to watch him in mockery. Samson, feeling the pillars of the temple, turned to the lad and said, Suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. The temple was crowded, with 3,000 men and women watching from the roof, laughing and jeering at him. But Samson's heart turned back to God. In his weakest moment, Samson prayed to the Lord. He lifted his blind eyes toward heaven and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. With his hands on the 2 central pillars of the temple, Samson pushed with all his might and cried out, Let me die with the Philistines. With a mighty groan of effort, he pressed upon the pillars, and suddenly the temple began to shake. The pillars cracked, and the walls trembled. The laughter and mocking turned into screams of terror as the temple began to collapse. The great stone structure came crashing down upon the Philistine lords and all the people inside. The ground trembled, and the dust rose as the mighty temple of Dagon was reduced to rubble. In that single moment, Samson slew more in his death than he had in his entire life. After the temple had fallen, there was silence. The Philistine rulers were dead, their city in chaos. But among the ruins lay Samson's lifeless body. His final act had fulfilled God's purpose, for the Philistines had been struck a mortal blow. When the news reached Israel, Samson's brothers and all the house of his father went down to Gaza to retrieve his body. They carried him back to the land of Israel and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father, Manoah. Thus ended the life of Samson, the mighty judge of Israel, the man who was born with a divine calling, who was blessed with great strength, yet fell because of temptation. But in the end, he turned back to God and fulfilled his destiny. The story of Samson is one of strength, weakness, failure, and redemption. He was chosen from birth to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God's service. He was given incredible strength, yet his greatest weakness was his own desires. Through Samson, we learn that no matter how strong we are nothing without God. He was mighty in battle, but when he turned from the Lord, his strength left him. Yet even in his lowest moment, blind and broken, he turned back to God, and God used him one last time to defeat Israel's enemies. Samson's story teaches us about the power of God, the dangers of temptation, and the importance of faithfulness. Even when we fall, God's mercy remains, and he can still use us for his glory if we turn back to him. Thus, the name of Samson is remembered throughout the ages, not just as a warrior, but as a man whose story reminds us that God alone is our true strength. Samson was given extraordinary strength, but he often used it recklessly. His story teaches us that when God blesses us with talents, abilities, or opportunities, we must use them wisely and for his glory, not for personal gain or revenge. Samson was called to be a Nazirite, set apart for God, but he repeatedly ignored his vow by making unwise choices, marrying a Philistine, touching unclean things, and revealing his secret to Delilah. His disobedience led to his downfall, showing that when we stray from God's commands, we open ourselves to destruction. One of Samson's greatest weaknesses was his desire for women, which ultimately led to his capture. His story warns us that giving in to temptation can have severe consequences. We must guard our hearts and stay strong in faith to avoid the traps of the enemy. After losing his strength, his sight, and his freedom, Samson repented and prayed to God. Though he had failed many times, God still answered him. This shows that no matter how far we fall, we can always turn back to God, and he can still use us for his purpose. Samson's final act was not done by his own power, but through God's strength. His life teaches us that true strength does not come from our muscles, intelligence, or abilities, but from God alone. When we rely on him, even in our weakest moments, he can accomplish great things through us. The story of Samson is a reminder that faithfulness to God is more important than physical strength. His life had moments of great victory and tragic failure. Yet in the end, he returned to God. We should learn from his mistakes and strive to live in obedience, wisdom, and trust in God's power.